This specimen is of the sagittal section to the nose and the palate to show the lateral wall of the nose. So here you can see the lateral wall of the nose is very uneven due to presence of projecting bars of bones which are called as concave. Okay. So surrounding the nose or the nasal cavity there are air sinuses which are called as the paranasal sinuses. So openings of these paranasal sinuses is into the lateral wall of the nose. So you can see above the nasal cavity in the ethmoid there are three air sinuses: anterior, middle and posterior ethmoidal air sinus. This is frontal bone, this is the frontal air sinus, this is the opening of maxillary sinus, here this is sphenoid, so this is sphenoid air sinus. Okay. So coming to the lateral wall of the nose, you can see three projections that is called as concave. You have the superior concha, then the middle concha and the inferior concha. While the superior and middle concha are projections from the ethmoid bone, the inferior concha is an independent bone. Okay, now coming to the parts of the lateral wall of the nose. In the anterior-inferior part where there is anterior opening of the nose called as the nostril. Okay, so immediately above the nostril there is vestibule of the nose which is lined by skin and has hair, short stout hairs, which is called as vibrissae. So just above this there is the atrium of the middle meatus. Okay, I'll tell you what is meatus, but for now remember above the vestibule there is atrium of the middle meatus. Now the nasal concave. So there is superior, middle and inferior nasal concave, and the spaces between this concave they are called as meatus. So there are three meatus: superior, middle and inferior meatus. The space between the superior and middle concave is called as the superior meatus. The space between the middle concave and the inferior concha is called as the middle meatus, and the space between the inferior concha and the floor of the nasal cavity is called as the inferior meatus. Okay, so these conchae are covered with thick, highly vascular mucoperiosteum which project from the lateral wall of the nose and they curve inferiorly. So in the specimen they have a part of these conchae has been sliced or cut, okay, so that you see the openings of the meatus. So coming to the superior concha, the superior concha is present in the posterior superior, this one is the superior concha which is present in the posterior superior part of the nasal cavity and is very short. Okay, the space posterior superior to it where you have the sphenoid air sinus and its opening is called as the sphenoethmoidal recess. Then the middle concha is much larger and extends from the atrium to the concha, to the choana. Choana is the posterior opening or the posterior nace of the nasal cavity. Okay, it's a posterior opening of the nasal cavity. The inferior concha is slightly larger than the middle concha. This is the inferior concha. Now the superior meatus receives the opening, that is the superior meatus between superior and middle concha receives the opening of posterior ethmoidal air sinus. Okay. Then the middle meatus. The middle meatus is much longer and deep. In the anterosuperior part, it receives a funnel shaped opening which is called as infundibulum, which leads to the frontal sinus. Then there is a deep curved groove on the middle meatus which is called as hiatus semilunaris, and the anterior ethmoidal and maxillary sinus opens into the hiatus semilunaris. The upper margin of the hiatus semilunaris is having a prominent bulge which is called as bulla ethmoidalis, on which there is the opening of the middle ethmoidal sinus. This is the middle ethmoidal sinus. Then the opening of the maxillary sinus, you can see a opening here. This is the opening of the maxillary sinus in the posterior part of the hiatus semilunaris. Okay. Then the inferior meatus in its anterior part receives the opening of nasolacrimal duct.